Saw this quote from Jonathan Clements the other day. He characterized retirement like this. Retirement is like a long vacation in Las Vegas. The goal is to enjoy it to its fullest, but not so fully that you run out of money. That's so true, isn't it? Hey, welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. This is the Retirement Answer Man show. The show dedicated to helping you not just simply survive retirement. We want you to rock retirement. So this week is the start of a month-long series of, listener questions, answering your questions on really anything you want to talk about. We're going to be very focused this week on Social Security questions since we just finished our Social Security month of July. And before we do that, we're going to talk about some fun retirement facts. And we're going to get Nicole on the show to help us with those questions. That'll be fun. So we can't do any of that, though, without that all-important disclaimer. Don't take advice from the voice in your ear. Don't take advice from me, Roger Whitney. At least on this show. I only give advice to clients I work for as a fiduciary. Looking for an advisor to walk this journey? Go to rogerwhitney.com and we can talk. But until then, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, your financial advisor before you make any decisions, and think of this as helpful hints in education. With that, let's go to the hot topic segment and just talk about some random facts I found from a pretty cool article on retirement. So one thing that's common in retirement talk is wanting to know how we're doing relative to our peers. That's a pretty common question I get when I'm working with a client or someone and they're divulging where they're at financially and what they've accomplished to this point is, how am I doing? How am I doing relative to everything else you see? Am I above or am I below? And I get that. It's a normal thing to compare ourselves to others. I normally don't like to. I always, in my business, we use benchmarking, financial advisor benchmarking, and they use that in many industries. And I was talking with a friend the other day at Podcast Movement, which is a geeky podcast conference. A lot of fun, though. Great people. And he and I were sitting. He was an advisor, and he's really into benchmarking, which I get because I know there's a lot of value to that. But I tend not to pay that much attention to it, mainly because I'm building my own life and building my own practice, and I'm doing it as best I can to serve me, my family, and the people that I work with. So a lot of times I just say, I told him, look, I'm playing my own game. I am playing my own unique game, so I don't pay that much attention to it. Because what happens is when you benchmark too much, now I do look at them from time to time, but when you benchmark too much, you start to judge yourself based on everybody else who may be playing a game totally different than you when it comes to saving or the choices they make in their life or what their ideal retirement is. So I think that can be a little bit dangerous. But anyway, I thought I'd throw out some just fun facts in this hot topic on retirement and retirement people. So since we've been talking about Social Security, why don't we start there? The average monthly retirement benefit that someone gets in Social Security, so this is average, is about $1,371 a month, or about just over $16,000 a year. So that's the average benefit, with the maximum benefit being $2,687. So according to the Social Security Administration, and I got a lot of this from an article written by Selena Maranjan. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. Hopefully I did a good job, but I believe it was from Motley Fool. So this is from that article, Retirement Stats That Will Blow You Away. Good headline. But according to the article, and according to the Social Security Administration, most elderly beneficiaries get 50% more of their income from Social Security. Unmarried retired people get about 90% of their income from Social Security. So go back to that average Social Security amount, about $1,300 a month. If you've saved up money and you're in the position to be talking to me, you're well ahead of most people, because most people haven't saved or weren't able to save that much for retirement. Now, according to Fidelity Investments, which administers a lot of retirement accounts, the average 401k balance in 2017 was $97,700. $97,700, with the average IRA balance of about $100,000. Now, it doesn't break that up by age. So you got some young people in there too. Other studies I've seen, though, show that the majority of people 50 or 60 don't have a ton of money saved up in retirement accounts. This is probably one reason why personal finance guru Susie Orman has advised most people should aim to retire no earlier than age 70. The article quotes her saying, every dollar you don't spend in your 60s is a dollar that you can keep growing for your 70s and beyond. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. That may be wrong. I mean, I guess if you don't have a lot saved, you're going to have to work, right? I don't think the choice is between work and not working. I think the choice is much more multidimensional than that. But I guess if you're a personal finance guru, you got to talk in broad, finite terms. But I can say that the same thing. Well, if you work to 80, that's every dollar you don't have to spend. I mean, when is enough enough? I was having this conversation with a client a few weeks ago, and it had to do with the worry about the future. And I basically said, look, you're never going to quote unquote have enough. Now I say what I mean is people that they can be worth, a few $1 million and never feel like they have enough. You're going to have to be extremely wealthy to even have that confidence. And even then you're going to find something else to worry about. So I disagree with this a little bit. Now, obviously, if you don't have the finances to pay for a lifestyle, you're going to have to work in some capacity, but I think you can also work to find work that you love that gives you time freedom sooner than what we traditionally think about. So I think when she makes that statement, my guess is she's thinking very binary. You're working or you're not working. And I guess maybe that's why it doesn't respond to me, is because I'm like, well, there's so much more in between that I've seen people do to gain time freedom and almost feel like they're retired, but still earn an income. So I get that. But you only got, this is that, hey, I want to have a great time while I'm in the Vegas of retirement, and you don't want to run out of money. It's a natural tension between those two. And I think financial people especially go way too far on making sure you don't run out of money. And then that's great, but then you may not have that much fun. I think there's a balance that needs to be found, and it's found in the in-between. Okay, off of that soapbox. What's the next one here? Now, this is, I think, an important one. 46% of people, according to the Retirement Confidence Survey, leave the workforce earlier than they planned. So they all had a plan of retirement at some age, and about half of them retire earlier than they expected. Of that amount, according to the survey, 55 cite health problems or disability as the reason, and about 24% cite work changes and downsizing, workplace closure, all those type of things. Say it another way. Hey, we got plans, but life happens. It can either be thrust upon us by a workforce downsizing or closure, or it can be health. So it's important more than ever to have some type of plan and to make sure you have a lot of financial flexibility, even if you feel like you got a plan that's set in place. And that's hard to do because when we're healthy and work seems to be going extremely well, why? It's not that urgent because I got 10 more years at this company. Well, a disability might say otherwise, or a major downturn in that industry might say otherwise. And the more flat-footed you are caught, the more dramatically impacted your life is going to be, in sometimes really bad ways. Whereas if you're always being, this is why I go to that agile retirement management, is because if you're being really, really intentional, one, your eyes are going to be open, and two, you're going to be financially much more flexible and hopefully be able to pivot in ways that you can't even imagine right now. I mean, think of somebody that's disabled. Maybe you're disabled from the kind of work that you're doing, but that doesn't mean you might not have a few things in the wings that you've been noodling on that you just hadn't pulled the trigger on. That's where that agility I think can really come into play. But I guess the point is, hey, half the people, it ends up happening, and that decision gets pushed forward a lot sooner than they ever expected. Two more facts. This is a Mass Mutual survey from 2014, again from the article. It said that they only found 10% of retirees were surprised to find themselves lonely, bored, or with a loss of sense of purpose, or depressed. Only 10%. I think that's awesome. I sort of talk about it, and I think a purpose in creating a compelling vision to pull you is really important, and it sounds, according to this survey, most people do a great job. That same survey, last fact, found that 72% of retired respondents report feeling quite happy or extremely happy in retirement. Well, that's awesome. I'd be interested to know, is it a year out, 2 years out, 5 years out? But I think a lot of it has to do with that time freedom, which is awesome. One more reason why you need to have a plan that is compelling you to create a future that you're really excited about. So just some fun facts. Wanted to throw those out there. But this show is all about you and your questions. So we're going to go to the practical planning segment, get Nicole on here, and start answering your Social Security questions. Questions. Who's got a question? It's August. It's 5-week month. The hottest month of the year is a 5-week month. Don't know. Boo. Exactly. So we are going to start with questions. And since I am so important, right, Nicole?
Where are you going with this?
I'm so important that I really can't read the questions I have to answer. I need to be efficient. So I need to bring in a serf to read these questions.
Oh. Do I need to go find one?
You actually run my life. You know that.
I guess I control the calendar, so.
Yeah, I'm definitely not that important, but I'm excited to have you in practical planning again. So let's dive into some questions. And this week, I think we'll clear up some of the Social Security questions from our series last month.
We got a bunch.
We got a bunch. Okay, well, let's tackle some of them.
All right. Our first question comes from John. And he wrote in, if my wife and I both retire early at 62 and I defer Social Security to my full retirement age, can my wife start claiming half of my monthly benefits?
No, she cannot. So the rules are that for a spousal benefit, the spouse who has the benefit that the other spouse is getting the benefit off of has to file for their own Social Security. So in order for her to get her spousal benefit off of your benefit, you're going to have to file for your own Social Security. So unfortunately, John, you can't do that.
John also has sort of a second part to this question. He wants to know, if I choose to work part-time, are the benefits that she receives from my Social Security account eligible for income penalties if my income is over the allowed limit?
Now, I'm not a CPA, so I'm going to give you a 90% answer on this one. My understanding is, John, that whether it's her benefit, your joint benefit, they're going to look at joint income, assuming you're filing jointly, to determine what kind of adjustments happen to benefits prior to full retirement or what portion of benefits are taxable after full retirement. So my understanding is that it is based on your joint income. So hopefully that helps.
All right. So we have another question from another John. I guess that's a pretty common listener name. He writes in, on your Social Security podcast, looking at yearly income, you discussed how small it was back when we were starting out versus what we're making now. One item I don't hear many talking about is those numbers being adjusted for inflation. In that case, if you maxed out Social Security payments in the 80s, does it have the same impact as hitting the $128,000 max now?
So that's an interesting question. So basically what he's asking is, if I made $30,000 back in the 80s, does that get adjusted for inflation when they're figuring out that average that figures out what your benefit is based off of? Does that make sense of what he's asking?
Yes,
okay.
It does.
And actually, I think I just found this out the other day in doing some research unrelated to your question, John. And actually it does. They do adjust those numbers up. Now, does it get adjusted up by CPI, or is there some, I don't know exactly the calculus to the adjustment, but yeah, they do. So back when I was dressing up as Chuck E. Cheese in 1984, and I made, I think, 6,000 or 7,000, that's going to be adjusted up to what those would be in today's dollars for, some poor kid that's doing that today. So yeah, John, they do.
All right. Our next question is from Jay. And he says, I keep hearing to wait to take Social Security, but if I do, I will have to draw from my investments because I've chosen early retirement 3 years before full retirement age. How do I calculate the opportunity cost comparison, and how do I factor in today's markets? Are there any other considerations? Love your podcast, Jay.
Oh, good, Jay. I'm glad you love it. So let's think about this. How do you calculate the opportunity cost of having to draw from investments rather than getting the Social Security supplement, whatever the sources of income you have? First off, you're going to need to understand, okay, is it taxable? Is this money you've already paid taxes on that you're going to draw from? Or are these pre-tax assets, right? Because that's going to impact how much you need. So if you need $2,000 a month, well, you can get that from your taxable portfolio, maybe from dividends, maybe from selling things. And if you have to sell things, you're going to be dealing with capital gains taxes, which are a lot less than income taxes. Whereas if all your money is packed away in a pre-tax account and you need $2,000 a month, well, you're going to have to gross that up because what? That's going to be taxable income. So you're going to have to take out much more than $2,000 to get back to the same number. So some of the answer to this is going to be based off of that, right? The second is, I think the way you would do it is you would just assume, okay, if I take my $1,500 a month in Social Security, as an example, I sort of switched the number, we'll say $1,500. What could that grow to? And let's just go up until the time you need the money. So let's assume that you have a 7-year period. You're 60 and your full retirement's at 67. Well, what would $1,500 a month invested be over that 7-year period? So if we assume, let's say, a 5% hypothetical rate of return, it's going to grow to about $144,000 over those 7 years. Now, we're assuming a 5% linear kind of return because I'm just using a simple calculator here, meaning that when I assume 5%, it's 5% every single year for 7 years. So you get that natural compounding. We know the real world doesn't work like that because sort of to your second part of your question is, how do we factor into today's markets? Well, first off, I would ask, what do you mean by today's markets? I always find that funny because over 27 years, there's always reasons to be worried about the market. When the market's high, well, these markets today are overpriced or are on the high end, so we need to be careful. When the markets are low, wow, these markets have been really bad. We got to be careful and wait for a bottom. You got to be careful with that kind of thinking because there's always a reason to worry about, quote unquote, these markets. Now, I'm not saying that we're not overvalued, that in the U.S. we might be on the higher end of valuations and we've gone through a nice growth cycle. Another aspect of that is what markets are you talking about? Are we talking about the U.S. stock market, international stock market? Like if we're just talking equities, stocks, well, international stock market hasn't really done very well at all for about 6 or 7 years. Yes, the U.S. has, but there are lots of different markets to talk about. So I would be careful about that kind of thinking. And I think the other aspect to this, Jay, is this is one that I am a proponent of for people that are willing to explore it is if you delay Social Security, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to take money out of your assets. You could do some pre-retirement where you have some income where you're working doing something, but you still have time freedom to help preserve your assets so you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. One last factor. Can I give one more, Nicole?
Why not?
One last factor is whether you're married or not and what your asset mix looks like or not, because it may be important, especially with Social Security planning, to preserve the survivor benefit for your spouse, which will be higher if you wait. And remember that will ultimately get adjusted for inflation based on how they do it, which could be very impactful 10, 20, 30 years from now, assuming your spouse lives longer than you. So there are a lot of factors into this, Jay. Some of it depends on the taxable. I always hate to say that it depends, Nicole, because it seems like a cop-out, but literally every situation is different based on the asset mix, the expectations of longevity, preferences, where they fall in the tax brackets. But those are some things I think you should consider, Jay.
Our next question is from Elaine. And she writes in, are there still any ways to have my husband take Social Security and suspend it where I can claim spousal benefit?
Nope. Sorry, Elaine. They did away with that. There's no way for the spouse to file and suspend that I'm aware of. There's my qualifier where they can file and suspend and you can get your benefit. They're doing away with, I think, all the loopholes. And that was a big one that really wasn't used by a lot of people. It was really used by people that were a little bit more sophisticated and had a little bit more wealth, and it was an easy one to get rid of. So I'm sorry. I think it's gone.
Elaine also wanted to know if there were any good calculators, since none of us knows how long we will live, to calculate the best time to take Social Security.
Well, we referenced some a couple weeks ago, Elaine, in our Social Security series where we referenced some calculators. Here's one thing to think about, though. The hard part with those calculators are that they are still only math-based in terms of looking at where's the break-even point, what's the potential lifetime value of a particular strategy. What I have found more helpful, at least in my practice, is which one positions you to live the kind of life that you define that you want to live. And we go over some of that in, the retirement plan lives, which is much more holistic. And the reason I bring that up is what I have found is sometimes the strategy that has the highest potential lifetime benefit and looks to be the best, when you factor in your life and your total net worth, actually isn't the most optimal to give you the highest confidence level that you can live the life that you want, which is really weird to me. So you got to define, you got to think of how you want to approach it, but there are plenty of good calculators that can show you potential lifetime benefits and those break-even points. And we talked about them a couple episodes ago.
Our next question is from Karen, who wrote in to say she is a young widow and she really appreciated the single retirement series that we did. So that was pretty awesome. And she's got some questions about Social Security survivor benefits. Her husband passed away at 50. And she's asking if, since she was out of the workforce for 20 years, will the benefits be adjusted for inflation, and how will it be calculated, since it will be 15 years until she reaches full retirement age? She also wants to know, is it true that she could apply for her own reduced benefit at 62 and then apply for survivor benefits at 67 without those being reduced?
Great question. So, Karen, the way survivor benefits work is you have the option as early as age 60 to apply for Social Security for that survivor benefit. And when you're looking at a survivor benefit, like on a statement that maybe you've gotten, that is the benefit assuming that you started today at full retirement in today's dollars. That means it will increase based on, so when you actually get to that age in the future, it is going to be adjusted for inflation. How that exactly is calculated within the Social Security Administration, I really don't have a clear enough understanding to provide that to you. But yeah, what you're talking about in terms of claiming strategies is double dipping. So usually when there is a spouse with, let's just say, less earnings than the other from a benefit standpoint, it makes sense to, if you're able, file for your own benefit as early as you can. So say 62, which will allow the survivor benefit to continue to get to what would have been the full retirement age or your full retirement age, and then switch to the survivor benefit. So you get the best of both worlds. You get to have some income as early as 62 on your own benefit, and you say you have money outside of that you can draw from and other things that you can do. And that will allow your widow benefit to accrue up to full retirement, and then you can switch to that higher benefit, which is adjusted for inflation until it gets there. The important thing to consider also is that there's really no benefit to waiting to apply for your widow benefit after full retirement age, because it's not going to accrue like your own benefit would to age 70. Now let's flip the situation real quickly. Let's say you have a benefit that's on par or closer to what the widow benefit would be. You can actually flip it, apply for your widow's benefit early as age 60, and allow your own benefit to accrue and increase up until age 70, and then switch to whichever one is higher. So you do have some flexibility there. So hopefully that is of value. And you said that you love the show, and that makes me smile. Thanks.
That's all I got for questions this time.
All right. So next week, we are going to come back and do more questions. But for now, Nicole, let's
get happy.
Let's get happy. Welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to be happy. So, Nicole, I don't know why it makes me happy because
you look like you're going to start laughing. I can't wait to hear this.
I talk to a lot of people, right? And you would think I'd have this talking thing down. So I don't know why this makes me happy, just because I laugh at myself. And I think that's probably the message of you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Some of them are going to be maybe a little embarrassing. It's best just to laugh at them. So I had to remind myself of that. And
Do we get to hear the embarrassing thing?
Okay. So I was on a call, a video meeting with a potential new client, really cool couple. And I was a little flustered because some things had been entered by someone in our office incorrectly, and I didn't realize it until I was in the meeting, and then I was trying to deal with it, but I was off my game a little bit. And we're talking, and I can't remember what word I was trying to say. It might have been best or impressed. I can't remember, but the word that came out was breast.
How was that received?
Well, everybody, and it was one of those things where when it came out, instantly I'm like, where did that come from? And the two people on the call definitely comprehended what came out. They didn't hear what I was supposed to say. They heard what I actually said. And we all just paused for a second, and I smirked and I apologized, and we just sort of moved on. But it was like, I don't think I've ever done that. And they were very graceful about it. We just kept moving, and, sort of everybody just laughed at me, basically. And I think that's really the point about if you want to live a happy life, you're going to make a ton of mistakes. Some of them are going to be a little embarrassing. So give yourself some grace, because most people will give that to you as well. You give me a lot of grace, by the way.
Yes.
All right, let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
All right, in the next 7 days, we are going to set a little baby step to creating a great retirement, but also living a great life. And I'm going to stick with this grace thing because there's always someone in our life that we probably need to give a little grace to. It could be yourself. Typically, it's always me.
It's me, yeah.
Yeah, it could be yourself. It could be your spouse. It could be your kids. We put such high expectations on our kids sometimes. But we're all human, and we're all struggling with so many different things. So your assignment for the next 7 days is to noodle on who needs some grace, and then go give it. All right, this is the month of questions. We got 5 weeks of questions. Go to rogerwhitney.com, click on Ask a Question. It's, I think, down. We have a new website that it's going to look sort of similar, but it's new. You can ask a question on the show page, or I think down at the bottom on the footer page. You click on Ask a Question, a little form comes up, and we'll try to answer it on the show.
Do you know for a fact that's what's going to be?
Yeah, we looked at it, didn't we?
I don't remember the thing at the very bottom.
Okay. Hey, if you have a question, go to rogerwhitney.com. It's probably on the home screen on this new website or on the show. But we'll do our best. Or you can email us at roger@wwkwealth.com. How's that?
I didn't realize you were recording.
We're still recording, so we're going to keep all this in here. See, this is what happens. This is how the sausage is made. So until next week, you have a wonderful day.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.